General Nathaniel Carter never expected to face down the barrel of a gun at a brother's funeral. The morning had begun like any other day of mourning at Arlington National Cemetery, until a police officer's shout shattered the sanctity of their final farewell. In that moment, standing before Major William Daniels' casket, Carter faced a choice that would define everything he'd fought for in his decorated military career. Where today we witness an act of prejudice that would spark national outrage. The crisp autumn wind carried weight beyond grief as General Carter, a four-star commander who'd led thousands through 3 wars, found himself profiled by a badge meant to protect and serve. Major Daniels had been more than a fellow soldier. He was Carter's protégé, a man he'd mentored from raw recruit to decorated officer before an IED claimed his life in a foreign desert. As Carter's fingers traced the polished wood of the casket, murmuring a final prayer, he didn't know his next battle wouldn't be fought in distant lands, but right here on American soil. The confrontation that followed would test not just his courage, but the very principles of justice he'd spent his life defending. Stay with us as we uncover how a moment of bigotry at a military funeral led to consequences that would echo through the halls of power and change one police department forever. The weight of command had taught General Nathaniel Carter patience. Through 3 decades of service, he'd learned that true authority lay not in shouting orders, but in the quiet strength that earned respect. Now, standing before Major Daniels' casket, that patience would face its greatest test. "Get down. Hands where I can see them." The command sliced through the sanctity of Arlington National Cemetery like a bullet. Carter didn't flinch. He'd faced death in the mountains of Afghanistan, led charges through Iraqi deserts, but this felt different. This was home. Sergeant Doug Harper's finger twitched against his service weapon. His face twisted with an ugliness Carter recognized all too well. He'd seen it in the eyes of enemies abroad, never expecting to face it here, yards away from rows of white crosses marking the sacrifices of Americans of every color. "I won't repeat myself," Harper barked, advancing with the cocky stride of a man who'd never had his authority questioned. The younger officer beside him, Bradley, shifted uncomfortably, his conscience visibly wrestling with his training. Carter's mind calculated options with battlefield precision. One wrong move could transform a funeral into a firefight. His soldiers, his family, stood frozen, their hands instinctively reaching for weapons they'd surrendered for the ceremony. The widow's quiet sobs pierced the tension like shrapnel. "You're making a mistake," Carter stated, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had guided troops through firefights. He could see the hatred in Harper's eyes, the deep-seated prejudice that had turned a black man in dress uniform into a threat. "The only mistake," Harper sneered, "is you thinking you belong here." The words hung in the air like poison gas, and Carter felt something shift inside him. Not anger. He'd mastered that emotion long ago. But determination. This moment would become a lesson, not in violence, but in justice. Colonel Sarah Davis watched from the honor guard, her hand clenched around her ceremonial sword. She'd served under Carter through 2 tours, seen him negotiate with warlords and comfort dying soldiers. Now she witnessed a different kind of courage as he stood, unflinching, before American bigotry. "Sergeant Harper," Carter's voice carried a weight heavier than his 4 stars. "Do you understand the concept of command?" The question wasn't just for Harper. It was for Bradley, for the gathered mourners, for anyone who'd ever confused authority with power. Harper's confidence wavered for the first time as whispers rippled through the crowd. The realization of who he'd targeted began seeping through his armor of prejudice. I'm following procedure," he stammered, but the excuse sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Procedure?" Carter took a measured step forward. "Is it procedure to profile a mourner at a military funeral? To draw your weapon without cause? To dishonor the sacrifice we're here to commemorate?" Each question struck like precision artillery, dismantling Harper's defenses. Bradley's face had drained of color as the magnitude of their mistake became clear. He joined the force to protect and serve, not to become an instrument of injustice. "Sergeant," he whispered, "we should." "Shut up." Harper's shout betrayed his crumbling control. His world was unraveling, and like many before him, he chose to double down rather than admit his error. "You're under arrest." Carter's laugh caught everyone off guard. Not bitter or angry, but genuinely amused. "Under arrest. For what, Sergeant?" "For mourning a brother in arms. For wearing a uniform with more stars than you have sense to recognize." The tension crackled like static before a storm. Harper's finger tightened on the trigger, and for a moment, the cemetery held its breath. Then Carter spoke again, his voice soft but carrying to every ear. "I've buried too many good men and women who died protecting the very freedoms you're abusing right now." The military police appeared without fanfare, their presence a testament to the swift justice of the armed forces. As they approached, Carter saw something break in Harper's eyes. Not just fear of consequences, but the shattering of a worldview built on unchecked authority. "You had a choice today," Carter continued, watching as the MPs took position. "You could have chosen respect, dignity, humanity. Instead you chose prejudice. And now, Sergeant Harper, you'll face the consequences of that choice." The handcuffs clicked with finality, each metal tooth marking the end of Harper's career. Bradley stepped back, his young face aged by the weight of witnessing justice's double edge. The gathered soldiers straightened, not in victory, but in vindication of the principles they'd sworn to defend. As Harper was led away, his protests fading into the solemn air of Arlington, Carter turned back to the casket. He placed his hand on the polished wood, completing the prayer that hatred had interrupted. "Rest easy, William," he whispered. "Your sacrifice wasn't in vain." The bugler raised his instrument, and the mournful notes of taps floated across the hallowed ground. Carter stood at attention, his posture perfect not from training but from respect. Respect for the fallen, for the uniform, for the eternal struggle to form a more perfect union. Colonel Davis approached after the ceremony, her eyes reflecting the complex emotions of the day. "They'll make an example of him," she said, meaning Harper. Carter nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where marble headstones stretched into infinity. "The uniform demands accountability," he replied. "Without it, we're no better than those we fight against." The sun broke through the clouds as they walked away, casting long shadows across the graves of those who'd given everything for their country. Carter's shoulders carried the familiar weight of command, but today that burden felt lighter. In standing firm against injustice, he'd honored not just Major Daniels, but every soul resting beneath Arlington's sacred soil. 3 weeks after the incident at Arlington, General Carter sat in his office reviewing Harper's sentencing documents. The former sergeant had received 5 years in federal prison. Justice served, but Carter found no joy in another man's downfall. Instead, he focused on the changes now sweeping through police departments nationwide as his story sparked crucial conversations about accountability and reform. Officer Bradley had reached out, requesting to speak at police academies about that day. "Sometimes courage," he'd written, "means standing against your own when they're wrong." The young officer's transformation gave Carter hope that change was possible, one heart at a time. The most meaningful response came from Major Daniels' widow. She'd sent a letter saying that while hatred had tried to taint her husband's funeral, Carter's dignity had transformed it into a powerful testament to everything William had believed in. "We believe in sharing these moments that challenge us to be better." General Carter's stand wasn't just about one confrontation. It was about upholding the principles that make America's promise possible. If this story moved you, help us reach more people by hitting like and subscribe.